Hey guys, things are escalating quickly in Italy at Campi Flegrei at the super volcano, and I don't mean this escalating earthquake swarm that keeps rumbling the region. That is escalating as well, but what we hear now about the real dangers, I mean, there's scientists that have always spoken out about this. I've reported about this over a year ago, but now they're really don't beat around the bush anymore, and they're calling out the authorities. But I am talking about seasoned scientists, volcanologists, seismologists from the INGV, from the Italian Institute of National Volcanology and Geophysics, and the Vesuvius Observatory. They have given interviews, and guys, what they're telling us is scary. Very, very concerning, and it changes the narrative completely. And I have already reported about Giuseppe Di Natale from the INGV yesterday in my other video, where he says we should have prepared way earlier and now it's too late. Time has run out. We can't do that anymore. And he says at least let's evacuate the red zone. That was shocking enough. And he was also hinting at, well, the civil protection and the authorities are still talking about this Brady seismic thing that has always been like this, and no worries, and we're preparing and we're monitoring this, and we are preparing for a bigger earthquake, and they're talking about evacuation scenarios. But guys, this thing could be way, way closer to blow than we originally estimated. And these seasoned scientists that are monitoring it every day, those are the ones that are telling us this. And what they have uncovered now, their explanations and the post that they're making in kind of desperation to alert the public is mind-blowing and frightening. I was frightened when I read what I'm about to show you. So this video is probably getting a longer one because there's so much information that I have gathered, guys. So stay with me till the end. I promise you it is worth it. I want to start with Giuseppe Mastro Lorenzo. He has said for a long time, guys, take this serious. Do not only prepare for a bigger earthquake. Your evacuation plans must be changed to a volcanic eruption as well. He is a volcanologist with the INGV and the Vesuvius Observatory, and he is the leading authority on local geology and civil evacuation plans. And he has just given an interview with a local television station in Italy. It seems that the officials are not giving him the space that he should deserve to alert the people. But what he has said, that could create panic. So let's hear it, guys. So the reporter is asking him, he said, well, I don't want to make this too alerty, but from a scientific point of view, as I understand it, all the indications exist that we should take certain precautions, yet this message is not being received by the officials. It's not being spread. Is that correct? And then he answered, yeah. And he said, what should have been said, what should have been told to the public. And he said, and I have always said this, I have written it formally in various acts. He wrote letters to the prefect. He was trying to get that out there. He said, is that in reality, there is no predictability regarding the escalation of this Brady seismic phenomena. So this is what's happening right now. The land is rising, and guys, the new INGV bulletin is out. And with this earthquake swarm, the land rise has accelerated significantly. I'll get to that as well. So he says the escalation of this Brady seismic phenomena is not predictable. And he said it is so true that just a few weeks ago, we learned that the H2S, like the hydrogen sulfide volcanic gases, had increased 5 times in recent years. And he says, we just found out about this. Maybe knowing this earlier would have been useful, and it could be a short-term precursor parameter. He says, for example, we didn't know this before. We learned about this just this week through a publication that has been done by my colleagues who are responsible for monitoring these emissions. And in reality, for years now, there have been sequences of bursts, like swarm-like earthquake sequences of an explosive nature that could be precursors of phreatic explosions or worse. In my opinion, even of eruptions. Boom, guys. He is the expert. He is watching the supervolcano daily. And I said he's not the only one. Also, Roberto Scandone said last year, he's one of the most seasoned scientists that they have that has been monitoring this monster for decades. He said, I'd evacuate now. That was last March, before they even had the strongest earthquakes in 40 years in May with a 4.4. But let's hear what Giuseppe has more to say, because it is very concerning. So he says, we have to expect eruptions. And he says, because if magma were to rise, and now it comes, and recent studies by the same authors responsible for this research indicate that magma may have already ascended to the hydrothermal system, so very, very shallow, close to the surface. It could theoretically be imminent. Imminent, guys. Imminent. He says, let's hope not. Let's hope the eruptions comes in 100 years, but it could also be imminent. That's what he is saying, guys. And he says, I'm speaking purely in scientific terms. There could theoretically be contact between the rising magma and the hydrothermal system. And guys, we know what that means. Hot magma that reaches water. That's an explosive mixture. Explosive. He said, if that is the case, that the rising magma and the hydrothermal system get in touch with each other, that could lead to a very rapid escalation. This is what needs to be acknowledged. That's what he wants the people to understand. While the authorities are still speaking of, there might be a higher earthquake, we need to secure the buildings, give them seismic upgrades, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. So he said, instead of this being acknowledged, too many reassurances have been given, creating the impression that the monitoring system ensures safety. Yes. That is exactly the official, I call this blah, blah. It's not being disrespectful, but it's always the same terms. We are monitoring this closely. We are on it. So this gives you, in his opinion, a false feeling of security. And I've always said that, guys. And he further says, for years, I have said that this is the wrong approach to monitoring this system. It's like saying, I have a thermometer, so I won't get sick, because my thermometer will ensure that I don't get sick and can treat my illnesses. You see what he's saying here? This is the same. We're closely monitoring the situation. I've always said, if I read that sentence, that doesn't make me feel good at all. And then he says, a thermometer is used to measure fever, not to cure diseases. You know what I mean? What he's trying to say, they're monitoring it, but they can't prevent an eruption or worse. Or like earthquakes. Worse is the big supervolcanic eruption. And then he says, what I said in 2023 already supports the position. He says that supports the position that has been taken by the Minister Musumeci, the Minister of Civil Defense. He said, contrary to what had been done up till now by both local authorities and institutional research bodies, Musumeci rightfully declared, to the disappointment of many, that these phenomena are unpredictable. But Musumeci is just receiving a shitstorm, because instead of giving a statement to the local escalation that's happening there with Campi Flegrei, which is really, that can affect the whole country if this thing blows. He's been on some convention and he's making Facebook posts about some pasta awards. He's posting some food and now people are angry. He's like, really, that's what you keep busy with right now while the country might face the biggest natural disaster ever or for Europe? So he says, Mastro Lorenzo, we may have to declare a transition to higher alert levels at any time. He wants to raise the alert level. He says he convened the Major Risk Commission, which recognized the unpredictability of eruptive processes, stating that an eruption could happen very quickly. He says, we hope that it's not happening, but this is the reality that we have to face. An eruption could be imminent and it could happen very quickly. And he has also said in previous statements, the magma is in a very explosive state already. And then if it mixes with the water, boof, there might be little to no warning. So all these evacuation plans with their, we need 72 hours to evacuate everyone slowly and calmly, you can fold them together and throw them in the garbage. And that's what he said already last year. So he says, furthermore, the monitoring system might not even be able to detect the magma ascent. They might not even notice, contrary to what had been claimed. So do you understand what's happening here, guys? If you've seen my last video about Giuseppe De Natale, who's a leading scientist at the INGV. And when he gave that statement, he said, I'm giving you this statement as a private person. I'm not speaking for the institution. And Mastro Lorenzo is basically the same. So it feels like these scientists are being muzzled to give out an official statement in the name of the INGV. But they feel that it is necessary to speak out, to warn people. So they're speaking out, despite going against their institution, in my opinion. And guys, while I'm speaking, a 3.1 high magnitude again just happened at Campi Flegrei. So that swarm is happening. It doesn't stop. So contrary to what has been claimed, this false sense of security, we're monitoring the system, there will be enough time to tell you if the magma's coming up. He says false. We might not even notice. And he knows what he's saying because he's the one who would be the one to monitor this and tell you that it's happening. And he says, we might not be able to do that. Do you understand the magnitude of what he is saying, guys? And he says, the assertion that the eruption is not imminent is so very far off. It is remote because we do not see magma rising. We can see it with our own eyes, but that is flawed. He said the magma might not be seen rising at all due to the specific characteristics of the Phlegreian fields, the Campi Flegrei, the burning fields. He says this system is completely different from Etna, Hawaii, or Iceland. We can make some predictions there. It's erupting on a regular basis and they can do some measurements. Campi Flegrei is way more complex. The 3.1 earthquake is only at a shallow depth also of only 2 kilometers. We will look at the earthquakes in this video too. I'll show you the epicenters. All of them, most of them are within the Campi Flegrei system, Pozzuoli and the Solfatara caldera. So again, Mastro Lorenzo, let's get back to that. He says, we might not see magma rising because it could ascend in a very insidious way in the initial kilometers when it starts to rise at a certain depth and then rise very rapidly in the final meters, before it reaches the surface, the more superficial kilometers. And he says this is characteristic of calderas with hydrothermal systems, like those forming in the uppermost layers of the crust at the Campi Flegrei. And he says this should have been clearly stated from the start. And he said, if it had been addressed in time, this situation would not be as critical as it is now. Because they would have raised the alert earlier, people would have been evacuated, no more building on top of the caldera. He said, right now, it is truly an emergency because nobody knows, none of us knows what to do. Guys, do you hear what he is saying? Do you hear that? He says it's critical right now and it's an emergency and no one knows what to do. And the other guy says, Giuseppe Di Natale, he says it's too late now to prepare. So he says further, we will see what happens today from an organizational perspective. However, if this had been declared earlier, if they had told the truth earlier, that's what he's saying, the population would have had time to secure themselves through seismic retrofitting of buildings, meaning that the buildings would not collapse and block the escape routes. Instead, people were led to believe that earthquakes were normal, that the Brady seism had never caused significant damage in the past. And we will get to this because Giuseppe Di Natale has made a Facebook post. This Brady seism is not normal. And that's also changing the narrative 180 degrees. It's mind-blowing. So I'll get to this after this, guys. He says, in the past, the assumption was based on past crises, but those lasted only 2 years and then ended in escalation. The current crisis has been going on for 20 years. And he says, previously, the phenomena followed a more or less stable trend with occasional peaks, but this time it is different. He says, if the population had been informed in time, there could have been measures for them. Make adjustments, secure themselves, prepare themselves, and for whoever had the means, move away from the area. They could have chosen autonomous relocation to safer areas. Whoa. Guys, and although I'm speechless by what he's saying, we have to jump to Giuseppe Di Natale's Facebook post right away, because that adds to this, to the level of, how do you say that? Angst. In English, you also can say angst. No, of escalation, frightening escalation, or like really we are realizing that is way more dangerous than we thought, that this is far more progressed. So Giuseppe Di Natale, he says, authorities keep repeating about this current seismic activity, about the land rise of the ground at Campi Flegrei, that it has always been like this for centuries, for millennia, and that's how we've always lived in this area. This is something totally normal that we have to live with. And then he says, human memory is really very short. And for these politicians who claim over the course of years or months, one thing and the opposite, eventually then they stay in the saddle for a very long time. He says the truth is that this is not true. And then he explains this, guys, and really listen carefully. He says, after the eruption of 1583, the big eruption, actually after 1580, because there were still earthquakes for a few decades after the initial eruption. So for about 400 years, there was no longer a single earthquake with an epicenter in the Campi Flegrei area. Nothing. It was completely silent after the eruption. And he says, nor was there any ground uplift, no land rise, nothing. Only subsidence. The land was subsiding because the magma chamber was empty, had emptied out. And he said the ground, after this 1538 eruption, began to rise again for the first time in 1950. And the first earthquakes reappeared in the 1970s. And he said in 1972, the seismicity, albeit very mild and of a magnitude not more than 2 or just a little more, ended. It started again 11 years later in 1983, this time much stronger. And he says, and then from 1984 to 2005, it did only subside. The land did only subside because they thought that in the 1980s Brady seismic crisis, there was a magma intrusion. Magma did get out of the magma chamber and did intrude in the nearby areas, but it wasn't strong enough to break the caprock layer to cause an eruption. But since then, and this is scientifically proven, the caprock layer has been weakened by all this that has been going on. The rocks are not that stuck together anymore. It's more loose. That caprock layer has only a third of its strength left that it had in the 1980s event. And what we're seeing right now, it's much more intense. He says a new episode of uplift began in 1982 and it ended in 1984 after less than 3 years. And then from 1984 to 2005, the land did only subside with very short episodes of the typical duration of 1 month or less of a short uplift of a few centimeters, and then accompanied by small seismic swarms. So maybe something was moving around there. But he says since 2006, that's when the current crisis started. It started around 2005, 2006. The current Brady seismic event started with seismicity at the very low end at the beginning, and then slipped into more earthquakes and earthquakes with higher magnitudes. And he says, it's a fact. It's true that for 19 years, we've been experiencing almost a continuous land rise combined with seismicity. And he says, I understand that now an 18-year-old who doesn't know the history of the place where he lives can believe that there has always been this land rise and these earthquakes. But he says the truth is far from that. He says from the 8th century BC and until 1430, he says, so for at least over 2,200 years. And then from 1580 to 1950, this area was absolutely quiet. Whoa. And he said, and in fact, in Roman times, it was very rich and coveted, with the only problem that they had was that the ground was subsiding. Which then, it was subsiding so much, it led to the abandonment of the port of Bay. So he says, those who lived in the Campi Flegrei at these times on horseback between the 15th and 16th centuries, and those who lived there between 1970 and today, were objectively just a little unlucky. But people couldn't know that. So he says, right, it's not normal. It means something. The volcano definitely can be quiet for a very, very long period of time. And then if it's not quiet, it means that something might happen. So that is significant. And the officials are saying something different, right? This is normal, has always been like this, don't worry. No, this is the volcano telling you something. And Giuseppe De Natale has also posted an interesting link where he has created a study that was released last year in August. He has conducted this study with several researchers, and he was basically in this study, the headline is the 1538 eruption at Campi Flegrei's resurgent caldera, implications for future unrest and eruptive scenarios. And what they're saying is The recent unrest at the Campi Flegrei caldera, which began several decades ago, poses a high risk to a densely populated area due to the significant uplift, the significant land rise. That's 1.40 meters by now. Very shallow earthquakes and intermediate magnitude and the potential for an eruption. And they did this in August 2024. And now we have this escalation. They say, given the high population density, it is crucial, especially for civil defense purposes, to consider realistic scenarios for the evolution of these phenomena. Be realistic. That's what they're saying. Particularly the seismicity and potential eruptions. The eruption of 1538 is the only historical eruption in the area, but it provides a valuable basis, that's what they're saying, for understanding how unrest episodes in this caldera may evolve towards an eruption. What they have done in this paper, and that's why he says what he said, what I just talked about the last 10 minutes. He said, in this paper, we provide a new historical reconstruction of the precursory phenomena of the 1538 eruption, analyzing, considering recent volcanological observations and results obtained in the last few decades. This allowed us to build a coherent picture of the mechanism and the possible evolution of the present unrest, including the expected seismicity, expected higher magnitudes, land rise, and eruptions. This is scary stuff, guys. There's way more going on at Campi Flegrei right now, but I don't want to make this video too long, so I urge you to subscribe and follow my channel for the updates so that you're always on the pulse with this. Because once I release this one, I will release the follow-up with more information. So give this video a like if you think that information that I found is valuable, guys. And if you want to support my channel, go to the links in the description of this video to my Buy Me a Coffee site, buymeacoffee.com/silky. You can follow me there for free, and you can support my channel right now, the vet bills for my dog's cancer treatment, by buying us a coffee or more. And thank you so much for those of you who have done that. And for the supers you keep sending us on YouTube, guys, you're absolutely awesome. I'm so beyond grateful for your support in this difficult situation right now. And I hope you're all safe wherever you are. So take care of yourself. Don't rely on officials. Use your gut feeling and rather be more careful. How I say, better safe than sorry, guys, right? My heart goes out to you. See you very, very soon. Bye-bye.